Hello everyone, my name is Surbhi and I'm a psychologist. And today I'm going to walk you through how exactly you need to read your research paper, psychology, or any other research paper without getting overwhelmed or burdened. So, if you've ever opened a psychology research paper and seen all those big titles, stared at it for hours, highlighted half of it, googled a bunch of stuff, and still felt lost, trust me, you're not alone. Each and every one of us goes through the same ordeal in the beginning. But here's the thing, it's not about reading more, it's about reading smarter and asking questions. So throughout this entire presentation, I'll tell you what questions you need to answer after reading each section of the research paper, and what notes to take and how you can think critically. So if you're beginning, then just follow the basic question answer format for each section. If you are advanced, you can go to the critical evaluation part of this video as well. Now, the first step is knowing the structure of research. Most psychology research papers follow a structure. It's called IMRAD. I for introduction, M for methods, R for results, and D for discussion. So think of it like a documentary where the introduction is setting the stage, method section is telling you how they investigated, what exactly they did. Results are basically what they found out, and D for discussion is where they try to make sense of whatever they have researched in that research paper. Now, step 2 is starting with the abstract and title. Don't jump straight into the whole paper. Start with the title and abstract. uh, I know it's a simple step, but a lot of time people sort of skip the abstract and just read the title and go to the introduction. It's very hard until unless you know how. This is one of those movies that you need to know the end to sort of uh, understand it. Okay. So now the title is basically where you get to know what paper is all about. The abstract is more like a trailer where they tell you what kind of samples were used, what were they trying to find, if there is any research gap they're trying to fill. Don't worry, all these things will make more sense as I go through the entire video. So basically, abstract will tell you why they did the study and how they did it and what they found out. It's like a brief summary, which is very useful if you don't have enough time to read the entire paper or you want to decide whether this paper is useful for you or not. Now, next, we need to slowly try to decode the abstract by answering questions like what is the study about? What topic it's about? What methods have they used? What is their main finding? And basically, again, concluding whether you want to read this paper further, is it relevant to what you are looking for or not? Now, step 3 is tackling the introduction. Introduction is basically a lot of information. It gives you the background of the research, it tells you what's already known and what gaps this study is trying to fill. This is a very important part because the reason for the research, why this research is getting conducted in the first place, it's most of the time mentioned in the introduction in detail with references. And while reading this particular part, you need to look for answers to what is the research question and what gap in the knowledge is the study addressing. Okay, so here, if you can see in this particular research, it's written additionally, most evidence based psychological therapies typically target negative effects. So that's what happens typically, but and that have a relatively limited impact on anhedonia. So this is the gap they identified, which they're trying to address with the current research. Now, the next thing that you need to look into an introduction is what are the authors trying to find out and test? Like, what exactly is, again, this is another way of looking at the gap, and have they made any specific hypothesis? Like here, after saying that, however, no studies to date have evaluated VR specifically for anhedonia, gap, this is the gap. Then Thus, the goal of this pilot study was to explore VR as a tool for exposure to positively reinforce stimuli. So now, don't get into the don't get bogged down that you don't know what exposure to positive reinforcing stimuli is. You just see, okay, this line explains the goal. First line, however, no studies is the line which is the gap, and then thus the goal that of this pilot study line is the goal of this study, what exactly they're trying to find out, and then the hypothesis comes in. We hypothesize that anhedonia in depressed individual would decrease as a function of exposure to VR scenes followed by imaginal recounting. Even though you don't know what is imaginal recounting is, or you know, this is the hypothesis they are working at. When they will do the research, either they will prove that this hypothesis is right, or they will say that this hypothesis is wrong. That is what they'll put their result section and discussion section will talk about. Now, step 4 is decoding the methods. The method section is where the author tells you how the study was done, what methods were used, what kind of samples were using, what kind of people or sample size was recruited, how they recruited it, where they recruited it from. Think of it like a recipe step by step, including where they got their ingredients from. But here, the important question that we need to ask is first, who were the participants? Like was the sample appropriate? What was their age? What was their background? If they had any any complications, like in this particular research, they were looking for people with anhedonia as a symptom, like depressed individuals. So that's what they have included here. And it also, you need to look at like how was the data collected. We discussed this before also in abstract. Here they have put that, where they'll put it in detail, like how they've written in this particular case is 13-hour long session over 7-week period with an average of 3 days between sessions. I know it's a complicated sentence, but that's what you just need to first highlight. What are the important lines that I need to look into. Otherwise, when you read a research paper, you need to understand that someone has researched and put this text together, and most of it will sound important. That's where we highlight most of the sentences, and then we don't know where to go back. So if we highlight only the important points, then we might be able to make sense of it. If not, then writing them down on the side is very helpful for people who cannot follow through like multiple highlights. Okay, and if you want to critically evaluate methods section, you can also, this is for the people who are well versed with how to do a research. This is not for the beginners, but if you would like to look into it in future, it includes asking, would I be able to replicate this study with these steps, like what the researchers are doing? If I do it today in my setting, eh, will I get the same result? Okay, and is there anything missing? Like, have they justified why they're taking a particular sample of particular age group? Things like that. Now, next step is reading the result. Okay, and I understand this particular section is always filled with a lot of technical information, lot of stats, but don't get stuck in the numbers. If you get too overwhelmed by the results section, you can always go to the discussion first. But bear with me, reading the result is, in especially in quantitative studies where a lot of numbers are thrown at you, I would suggest you just highlight the words. You leave the numbers, you just highlight the lines which you, according to you, are the key findings of the research. Or like, and the second part is the part where they say that whatever their finding is was statistically significant or not. Because a lot of time papers say that okay, fine, yeah, depression symptoms were decreased when they used this particular treatment, but was the decrease in depression symptoms significant? That is something that you need to look into. And also, like, if you don't get the math at all, Do I understand at least the trend, like whether there was a decrease or an increase, stuff like. Now the next step is decoding the discussion section. Okay, so here's where you get the summary. Okay, why we did it, what did we conclude, whether the result that we have got is significant or not, how do we relate this to findings in the past. Like in this particular study that we have taken, for example, it says decrease in anhedonia have also been reported in case study of VR for PTSD. So this particular treatment has been proven to show result in PTSD. But now this research they're claiming is the first study to demonstrate the impact of positive VR seen on anhedonia in the context of depression. So they're just setting their research in the broader topic of using VR for different mental health diseases. Now, if you want to dig deep, then you can also look for limitation and weakness, which are also mentioned in the discussion section. And what the future of research do they suggest? Like if they have mentioned that they used a small sample size, maybe 10 people or 15 people, and they suggest that to prove that their research is right and like they'll get the same result on a broader population, or this treatment should be used in a broader population. For that, the same treatment should be used across a bigger sample size to prove the validity, like to validity of that treatment, validity of that therapy, etc. And which will also help in understanding what in the future should be done. Like, okay, this is was a small study done just as a proof of concept of whether this works or not. That's how all the research is done, right? Like first you do it on a small sample size with small amount of resources, then if it's proven to show any kind of results, then that's when you implement it on a bigger scale. Now, this part is for critical readers. This part is for people who have already mastered the first part of the presentation, where you understand where when you read the paper and you get the answers for all the questions that we mentioned. Okay, this is about critically evaluating papers because not all published papers are perfect. Be a detective and like you need to keep an eye out for things like tiny sample sizes, no mention of bias. When I say bias, it means like who is the conducting body for this particular research? Do they have any conflict of interest with the results? Um, Confusing stats or any unjustified conclusions? Do they control for important variables? Like have they used controls and there is no placebo effect? Then are there any confounding factors? Confounding factors is basically an outside variable which can influence the result. Let's say if we are checking the use of a particular treatment therapy for people with depression, and it says that okay fine, a lot of patients with depression showed a decrease in the symptoms after going through this treatment. Okay, but there can be compounding variables like only like how severe was the depression, like on a rating scale or a symptomatic say scale, how severely or moderately depressed were these patients? Did the severity of depression have any role to play on how much decrease uh, the research or that treatment will work? Like the work or the effectiveness of treatment, is it dependent on the severity of the depression? So this is an important point, and this is how we see that are there any confounding factors. uh, Now, next can be, did they explain why they used a particular statistical test? Is that test validity has been checked for this kind of research or not? And if you are not aware of how to find this out, whenever first they mention in the method section that they have used this particular statistical test, they give a reference to a paper where which has proven the validity or past use of that test in this kind of research, and you can see if that is valid or good enough or not. This is again very This is very much part of critical reading, and it's a little advanced, but it's good to know so that you can at least know that something like this exists, or you can like look into this. Last will be, does anything feel too good to be true? Like, are the results too, like, too easy, or like, I mean, if the sample size is too strong, does it even make sense? Now, the final tips for smarter reading. This is like basically a summary. Start with an abstract to know whether you want to read the full paper or not. Follow the IMRAD structure. If result section is too overwhelming for you, skip to the discussion and then go back to the result later. Keep asking questions that I have mentioned for each section, and take notes by section so that you can prepare a summary and understanding for yourself. Now, if this helped you, hit like and subscribe or drop your questions in the comments. My name is Surbhi, and I promise reading research gets easier when you have the right questions in mind. Thank you.